You know, it's funny, I was talking to Dan McDonnell in the office earlier on, and we were looking at our conversation on the podcast, and Republic of Ireland squad felt a touch dull, and it turns out it's been a touch interesting. Conán Doherty here alongside me once again. Hello.
Heimir, is that the wheel?
Well, I think that is the point. So Dan's going to join us presently. This is all very hot off the presses, and Dan is currently in conversation with Heimir Hallgrimsson. But to give you the situation, which is just broken in the last while, Republic of Ireland squad has been named, and our new fearless leader, Heimir Hallgrimsson, has named a 24-man squad. The fixture list: Finland on Thursday and Greece on Sunday in Helsinki and in Athens. The criticism of Heimir last month was he's a little hands-off, if you remember. That was one of the things being said about him. He was sort of on the outside watching in. He has put a stamp on this squad. The headline news, I suspect, is no Matt Doherty. Not an injury situation, just no room for Matt Doherty in the squad. There is no Jacob Bryan. He has struggled for game time at Everton since his move there. There is no Alan Brown, interestingly. Started against Greece last month and came off the bench against England last month, but he's out. And there's no Callum Robinson either. It was reported yesterday there were injuries to Seamus Coleman and Will Smallbone, and so it's proved. Smallbone, hamstring injury. He did play both games last month, and Coleman was injured against England. He hasn't played for Everton since. On the inclusion front, Josh Cullen returns from injury. That somewhat offsets the Smallbone absence. And then Ipswich Town are now a bigger part of our lives, featuring in the Premier League. So the midfielder Jack Taylor is in, and that will be his senior debut should he get some game time. Mark McGuinness of Luton Town, centre half. I guess you could kind of say he is coming in for Jacob Bryan. Hallgrimsson was talking in his press conference about the fact that we've a lot of good centre halves. There isn't like a huge gap between them all, and so Jacob Bryan, you're not playing so much. I'm going to have a look at Mark McGuinness at Luton. So that's his first Ireland senior call-up. And then another a bunch who are happy to get the call. Finn Azaz from Middlesbrough, Aberdeen's Jamie McGrath, Udinese, now of course on loan at Watford, Festi Ebusele, and Mikey Johnston at West Brom now. They're all back into the squad. They were all left out in September. So we're going to talk to Dan in a couple of minutes and get his thoughts on it all. Naturally enough, Conán, Matt Doherty was the first question that Hallgrimsson was asked about. So here's what he had to say about the Matt Doherty exclusion.
Yeah, we knew this question would come, so not easy to motivate that for me. So first of all, we know that Matt and Seamus has been here for a long time in the squad. Our most experienced fullbacks, our best fullbacks playing at the highest level for a long time. But unfortunately, they will not play forever. So we need to have a plan B if they are not there. So my job is to get this team to the World Cup in US 226. And given that next year, 2025, if we end up in a group with 5 nations, all our FIFA windows next year will be official World Cup matches. So this is the only chance to kind of experiment, to give players chance to show what they can do. And that is the reason why we opted to go for other players at this stage. I called Matt yesterday. Obviously, he deserves for an explanation. He was not happy, of course. He wants to play every game for Ireland, but I just ensured him that it's not like we are leaving him out. We're just testing other players. I think because of his experience as well, not to bring him in to have him on the bench. It's better just to give him this camp off.
So it's interesting. Not fully buying that explanation, I think. So if you remember, just to jog the memory, even against Greece most recently, it was a really atrocious Matt Doherty moment for the second goal where throw in near side as the camera looks, slightly to our left and around halfway, and Matt Doherty had his man and decided just sort of to play offside, even though he wasn't even last man back, and his man said, okay, thanks very much, and ran in on goal, and Doherty didn't even seem to panic and run back, or it was just a really odd moment. And Stephen Kelly on RTE, if you remember, who's a very fair judge. I don't think Stephen Kelly's in the business of trying to eviscerate anybody. He was asked by Joanne Cantwell about the goal. And here's what he had to say.
Listen, I'm not one for calling out a player and saying it's bad, but this is awful. Really is awful. Matt Doherty is tracking his runner and he just stops. And then what's worse about it is the jog back. You cannot legislate for a player jogging, and it's just a run. The ball bounces up. Solis heads it into the air. Collins is trying his best to get back, but gets done by the chop. But Matt Doherty just actually runs back, sprints back in. He'll probably recover in that position. And like I said, you can't legislate for that. That's nothing got to do with the forward changes. That's nothing got to do with the formation that's changed. That's just a lack of, I don't know what he switches off. He doesn't think he can get there. I don't understand what the concept is. Just sprint, and there's no excuse because you're fresh onto the pitch. Matt is not played the whole game. It's wherever time is in the match, and he's not played the whole game. So he's in a position where he should be able to sprint back and see that danger and get back in and cover. You make the mistake initially, but then you think, right, what can I do? Can I recover back in? Sprinting is the basics of football. It really is, and that's just, I don't know what you do with that.
So it's pretty damning. And I think for Doherty, this is not a new situation. It feels like the body language has been off for a while on the pitch. Everything's a bit of an effort. He's just a yard slow in getting back into position. The socks are down around his calves. And there's always been a bit of that with him, even when he was in really good form. But now that he's been out of form for some time, it's like an exacerbation of all of that. And this is going on a long time. I distinctly remember Hampden Park in September of 22, 2 years ago now, pretty much to the day. I'm sure Ireland were beaten 2-1 by Scotland under Stephen Kenny. And even for one of the goals, in terms of trying to stop a cross, it was one-on-one and it was just so lax. And Scottish player shifts it towards the byline and is about to cross it in, and Doherty just sort of rooted to the spot, like half cocks a leg, doesn't stop the cross. And I thought it was really instructive even summer just gone against Hungary under John O'Shea when he was substituted at half time. And he had a really bad first half, and he took to Instagram and he posted 45 of my best and an emoji with an upside down smiley face. And that's not a hanging offence. That is a glimpse of humanity on his part. There's a bit of humour. It's self-deprecating. But what was very telling, I think, was the reaction, even allowing for the negativity that can go online. The tone amounted to, buddy, you don't have half as much credit in the bank here as you think. You're not off a run of 5 man of the matches and geez, everyone has a bad day at the office. It was more like something's gone awry here. So it feels fairly ominous for Doherty. The one, the Hallgrimsson explanation there also doesn't quite tally, in that he's talking about building for next year where all the games are crucial. But based on what he said last month, consistently across several different press conferences, is his main thing with Ireland, how he sees Ireland is, we need to find our first 11. We don't have that many games. We need them to play together as much as possible, build connections on the pitch, maximise the amount of game time they have. So it's kind of a glaring contradiction. Like, it's either, one, he doesn't want to come out and lambaste Matt Doherty publicly, which maybe is to his credit, and you'd kind of hope it's that. Or two, his thinking is very muddled. It's either I want my 11 and I want them to play together all the time, or it's not. But there's actually no in between there, and he's sort of trying to reach for a bit of an in between. World Cup 2026, big games next year. This, we need a plan B.
Which he doesn't need to do. He's the manager. He's putting his stamp on it now. On Doherty, posting 45 of my best isn't a hanging offence, but it is a suggestion that he should be playing more minutes than 45 minutes. It's a suggestion that I can't believe that Ireland only let me play 45 minutes. I can't believe that team aren't letting me do whatever I want, basically play for 90 minutes like that. That's the tone you take away from a post like that.
I didn't interpret it as that. I think it was like a hands up, I was terrible, not 45 of my best. Yeah,
and maybe that's fair, maybe that's the way it is, but to go back to the moments that you're talking about, Stephen Kelly is so bang on there. Matt Doherty does have a languid style, and like you mentioned, when he was at his best, he had that. He scored a goal for Ireland last year, and I've never seen a more underwhelming celebration. He just looked like, it looked like Matt Doherty just in every other incident. But when you're not running, when you're not tracking back, I think what would frustrate fans is say to like of the James McLean interviews recently about when Ireland are at their best, it's everybody getting stuck in, running, playing tight, backs to the wall, sticking together. They could have all still done that, whatever way they were playing. They could have all still done the basics of sprinting. They could have all done the basics of emptying themselves, and that's what would be frustrating. But it's funny that Heimir is feeling the need to do that as well. Like, you know, like the way he's almost trying to justify what he's doing. He's not dropped. I've just picked somebody else. That's what being dropped is. You know, for whatever the reason. You know, some people get dropped because you want somebody else ahead of them, and that's exactly what he's done here.
Dan McDonnell is with us. Afternoon, Dan.
Afternoon, lads.
So we're starting with the headline, the Doherty dropping, but he's not dropped. We've played the listeners the Hallgrimsson explanation, and also Stephen Kelly, for instance, eviscerating Doherty reluctantly on TV after the mistake against Greece last month. If it looks like a dropping and quacks like a dropping, etc.
Oh, no, he's been dropped. He's absolutely been dropped. I mean, there was a lot of speculation last month that he was going to be dropped. I think this isn't a massive surprise, really. I thought it was interesting. You can tell a lot about maybe the views of earlier this year, of around the Ireland camp earlier this year from what happens in the Virgin studios. And I think Brian Kerr at one stage said he was surprised that Doherty played against England. Make of that what you will, but it sort of gave the suggestion he was on shaky enough ground within that group. And obviously, as we know, John O'Shea's been quite influential. I know Dan Whelan was quite very critical of the players, and look, there is a feeling that Matt Doherty probably wouldn't have been winning maybe a popularity contest with the interim team, I think. And when Hallgrimsson has gone that step further now, I suppose, by just dropping it completely. And of course, the fact is, I mean, Seamus Coleman is out, so there might have been a possibility that would offer him a reprieve. I think I might have suggested it last month that Doherty was vulnerable for October, but Coleman's injury might save him. It hasn't. So, and yeah, the excuse to me is just a diplomatic way of dropping someone. Either that, or we have another manager who doesn't think the Nations League is that important, which would be slightly worrying, because I think if anything we've learned from recent years is that the Nations League is very important and it's not a time to experiment. But clearly in his eyes, it's the way to plan for a future without Matt Doherty.
Do you have any sense of why Matt Doherty has lost his way, Dan?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I heard a bit of your chat there, and like he does have this style. Like he is, I mean, I suppose he is like what he's 33 in January. You know, at his best, he was. I know he spoke a lot about changing his diet, you know, at Wolves. I mean, Matt Doherty's career, like his career is a massive success story. Like he was an average championship player for the bulk of his 20s. You know, the Portuguese Revolution at Wolves, he survived it, you know, when others fell away. And, you know, he sort of evolved and seemed to like a lot of the training and sort of almost a continental style player who'd been lingering in the championship all along. Gets a big move to Spurs for the Mendes connection that comes up from Wolves, which is unusual, I guess, as well. I thought at times in Spurs he was fine, but I don't know. Like his body language is never going to warm the hearts of those. And there are Irish fans who would prefer our players to run around aimlessly sometimes and just tackle people. And like obviously that's never going to be Matt Doherty, but equally, you know, there's been a sloppiness at times, and yeah, like I think that Instagram 45 of my best sort of points. That's just sort of his ironic humour. I think Shane Duffy responded same at the time because he'd also been terrible in the first half of that game. But I guess people just don't get him sometimes, and he is just one of those characters that needs to be performing really well. And at times under Stephen Kenny, he did play quite well for Ireland, particularly early on. I think he might have played more times for Kenny than any other player, potentially. But yeah, his career is just stalled. That Atletico Madrid move, you end up sort of in the Mendes cycle then. That was clearly just a player being moved around to suit a couple of needs at that time. And he's at Wolves now. He's in some weeks, he's out the others. But maybe he's just not viewed as the leadership figure for where the squad needs to go. Or maybe sometimes the manager just needs to make an example and say, okay, Nobody can get too complacent here, and maybe this is just me speculating. It's my opinion on it, but maybe there's a feeling. Well, this is maybe he was too complacent in their eyes.
I suppose the criticism of Hallgrimsson in the last international window was he was a little hands-off. This squad speaks of a little more hands-on, I think. Any impressions on that front from today?
Yeah, definitely. I will say there's an important change, though. Today, remember Trapattoni, Ireland used to name 40-man squads. I mean, no wonder the FEI were broke. They'd have to, there's like 10 players extra being brought on trips, hotels and flights and everything. FIFA sort of streamlined it a bit now. You have to pick just a 23 or 24-man squad. So it would have been easy to keep the likes of Alan Brown, Callum Robinson, even Matt Doherty maybe, in this squad if it was 27, 28, but it actually puts more pressure on managers to actually make decisions at the squad stage. So, Jake O'Brien has been left out as well, but he hasn't played for Everton. Again, normally that might be enough to have you in the squad with 27, 28, not this time. So, but he did speak about being at games last week without giving a huge amount of detail. He did say he'd watched Finn Azaz from Middlesbrough play in the Championship. That helped to get him in. Mark McGuinness from Luton seems to be replacing Jake O'Brien. He's ex-Ireland 21 defender of similar size. He's well over sort of 6'5", 6'6" territory. So yeah, he's had to cut some players this time, and he's done it. And he's come out and he's explained it. He's not coming out and explaining it by saying John O'Shea told me to do this. So I think if you in those simple terms, he's owned those decisions. And while there may still be elements of what he's saying is very much, look, it's early days for me in this group. And you could argue that even the comments about the Nations League not being the be-all and end-all is maybe still buying a little bit of time in some ways. In his commentary, I think I would agree that there was a lot more I'm the boss today for sure.
Yeah. Well, look, 2 games in and these 2 to come, I guess he's still entitled to a bit of time. It's just obviously international level, that's very difficult to come by. So we'll talk more about that in due course, Dan. You are en route to Tala as we speak. Apoel Nicosia are in town. Shamrock Rovers have a European night ahead of them, with Shells to come on Sunday and Shells Pats in the rearview mirror. It's been like a busy week in your world in many ways and a good week. Exclusive on the back page this morning. More good news for the league. I'll give the very uncomplicated version, and I know it's more complicated than this, but the short good news is there is a windfall of UEFA money now for Premier Division, not First Division, but Premier Division League of Ireland clubs. Again, intricacies more complicated than this, but the Swiss model Champions League is here. The big teams are getting more moolah. They are getting away from the rest, and so some good old trickle-down economics is at play here. The net version of the situation is that Premier Division clubs, as I understand it, they are, once all this settles down and things are adjusted in the year or two ahead, they will go from getting 70k per annum from UEFA, and they will jump to 350,000 per annum from UEFA. So from 70k to 350k per year. Thank you very much, UEFA. Who needs a Brexit adjustment fund when you've got this kind of good stuff coming down? Well done getting the story. It's a big story for a Premier Division club. That's serious, no?
Yeah, I think, look, this had been flagged that this change would happen. I think probably the new aspect to this is the fact that they're going to be basically paying 2 lots of it next year. I suppose to put it in parallels, it's like they've always been paying this money at the end of a year, and now they're going to try and bring it forward. It's like people putting down a month's deposit or something on a rent. You're always a month ahead, but it was the other way around with this UEFA money. So they have to bring it round and bring it forward. But as a consequence, teams like Premier Division clubs who happen to be playing in the Premier Division of the League of Ireland in 2024 and 2025 are going to benefit from getting 2 cracks at that new 350 figure in 1 year, effectively. So it's like there was an expectation that the money would go up, certainly to a decent level, but I suppose there's a confirmation element around that now, but also that there's a double bubble element to 2025 for the clubs lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And then 12 months on, there'll be the 350 and it'll be in advance. So it's extraordinary, really, because I was, this is quite dense, so not to get bogged down in it, but yeah, there's a big funding discussion ongoing at the moment. Like I was in listening to Thomas Byrne speak yesterday and not give very encouraging messages maybe about League of Ireland academies and funding, but all of a sudden you have this situation where like UEFA really does fund small associations. It's UEFA's conscience probably, throwing out a few quid and for a few votes as well. To compensate for the fact that obviously the top end of the game is getting richer and richer,
yes,
and they're throwing a greater percentage to the poorer leagues and clubs.
And is this no strings attached? If a League of Ireland club wants to phone up a Premier League reject and say, we're going to pay you 700 grand to come and play for us next year, they can have at it. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think they're loosening the criteria. There was loosely a sort of a youth training aspect to this. There are going to be criteria attached going forward around you need to have a women's team, you need to have certain this and that. I will say that maybe it's caused a lot of disquiet in the Irish football world. And I'm conscious of making this too dense, but this money from UEFA has always been here. It used to be around 1.4 million per year, and the FAI, even though it wasn't recommended by UEFA, would divide it out amongst clubs in both divisions. Now, Ireland obviously has 2 leagues, but obviously if you have a country with 4 divisions, then you divide it 40 ways. The recommendation is that it's top league only. The FAI took this dispensation and said, no, we're going to give half of it to the first division. But these rules laid down by UEFA in tandem with the European Clubs Association now say only a small percentage can go to the second tier clubs in any country, which means that a first division club, like we're talking Premier Division clubs, bonanza time, first division clubs are cash strapped and their money is going down and they're not happy. And I would expect, and I was already getting messages about this this morning, expect there to be sort of war over this still. So there may still be a bit of back and forth. If you're giving them extra money here, we might want extra money there. I reckon there's a bit of domestic squabbling to come out of this.
Okay. You're en route to Tala, Applewell in town. Talk to us.
Yeah, it's a weird one because normally like the start of a group stage campaign is just like a really exciting event of its own right. But because Rovers have a massive game on Sunday, because we've had this Pat Shells game on Monday, which was brilliant, it sort of slipped up. And I mean, the title race, Rovers are in it if they win on Sunday big time, and probably with all the defeats they've had, they would have thought they would be out of it. So I'm going there wondering, will we see a team that suggests actually they've one eye on Sunday, which seems crazy when these are massive games in their own right. And there are individual players in this Rovers squad who will view this group stage as a big opportunity. It's like the Champions League format for people. You only play a team once. So it's a cup final. It's not about getting the point on the board and trying to get into a top 2. It's completely different psychology. I'm looking forward to it. I think they've got a chance of being competitive against Applewell, who are their form would suggest they can be flaky. On a good day, yes, they should beat Shamrock Rovers, but they don't always have good days. And Rovers should attack this game. And the thing about it is as well, it's not like you lose, you're out of the group. All 6 games you can attack them. There's big money at stake each time. So it should be lively.
Very good. Enjoy. We'll talk soon. Dan McDonnell, thank you.
Thank you.
And there we are. So that is absolutely Matt Doherty dropped. I mean, Heimir did his best for him, but it's just no dressing it up. It's such a pity. I guess, look, he's 33, and I agree with Dan. His career has been a success. You turn yourself from League of Ireland player into Championship player and then into, for a time, as good as any fullback in the Premier League. And I'm sure make money which secures your future, and you play for Ireland the guts of 50 times. I like... In the round, it's been great, but it's just been that tricky few years for him. And this is quite a sad ending, I would suspect, for him.
Yeah, Matt Doherty's actually the first person who came onto my radar as a master of the underlap. Going inside the winger, and he was very good at it. Maybe he picked it up at Wolves. Maybe it was a habit he always had. And I'll always be thankful for him for a lot of those dull games. Remember the end of the O'Neill era, the McCarthy era? You're watching him. I remember being at a game against Gibraltar, and that one in particular, it was only Seamus Coleman that would make something happen, and it was the exact same with Matt Doherty. You were just waiting for one of our fullbacks, whoever it was, to try and open a whole team up, and we were really dependent on them for a while.
Yeah. That is this edition. Gary Breen is with us. We're talking some Champions League a little bit later on, but we do want to bring you that Irish squad announcement. 24-man squad. Finland next Thursday. Today week?
Yes.
Today's Thursday.
Stay next week.
and then Athens. What could go wrong on Sunday? So look, it's going to be interesting. That notion that Heimir Hallgrimsson has decided to properly take control of things and make some big decisions, I think maybe bodes well. So that's that. We'll talk to Dan, I'm sure, next week.